2 weeks ago, I received an email from the Israeli consulate with an invitation to attend a meeting this past Thursday. It read, "The Consulate General of Israel in Los Angeles cordially invites you to a conversation with Tzachi Hanegbi, member of Knesset and Minister for Regional Cooperation." Then below Minister Hanegbi's picture was the following comment: "Prime Minister Netanyahu appointed Minister Hanegbi to help find an acceptable arrangement relating to egalitarian prayer at the Western Wall." And I thought I understood what the conversation would be about. As you know, the meeting was 2 days ago. I canceled our regular Talking Torah class to attend this conversation. For those of us who aren't as familiar, negotiations between Women of the Wall, the Reform and Conservative movements, and the government of Israel to create an egalitarian prayer space at the Wall to respect Jewish pluralism and the liberal streams of Judaism has been going on for years and years. And we thought we had reached an agreement with the government until last June, when it was put on hold, to summarize it and simplify it, because the ultra-Orthodox parties threatened to break up the government if the compromise went through. There were 6 rabbis there in the room, 4 Reform rabbis and 2 conservative rabbis, Rabbi Ed Feinstein of Valley Beth Shalom and me. Minister Hanegbi entered, and there was a brief introduction by the Consul General, Sam Grundwerg. Minister Hanegbi had served in the Knesset for 27 years, working with more than a handful of prime ministers, serving as minister of many, many different departments of government over the course of his career. And when Hanegbi introduced himself, he said that when Prime Minister Netanyahu called him into his office to ask Minister Hanegbi to help figure out how to resolve the stalled Kotel compromise agreement, Hanegbi disclosed that if Netanyahu was looking for an honest broker, Hanegbi was not his man. You see, decades ago, when Hanegbi himself was a young man, he met a young American woman from Miami who was studying for a semester abroad at Hebrew University. And they started to date. And as it turns out, she never went back to Miami. They married. She's been his wife ever since. They have 4 adult children together now. And it was decades ago that she informed him that she was something he never heard of, called a Reformed Jew. Hanegbi said that he's always understood from that moment how important Jewish pluralism is in the United States and how important it should be in the state of Israel. Hanegbi noted that unlike most Israelis, he belongs to 2 shuls. The Mizrahi shul that his grandfather helped build in Tel Aviv, and the Reform synagogue he attends with his wife and children in Israel. As it turns out, Netanyahu said that Hanegbi's experiences and appreciation of the liberal streams of Judaism was exactly the reason that Netanyahu thought Hanegbi should spearhead this effort. For Hanegbi, this is not political, this is very personal. Hanegbi just had a meeting like ours in San Francisco, and he was leaving on Sunday for New York to have one more meeting like ours before returning to Jerusalem. Each of the rabbis introduced himself and herself, and then most gave a few-minute introduction about our relationship to the topic. For some, it ended up being a 10 or 15-minute introduction. When I spoke about Roadmap Jerusalem and living in Israel and loving Israel, and about the bat mitzvahs that I officiated last summer at the Kotel. And then I explained that Hanegbi and Netanyahu don't realize it, but there is a crucial Kotel bat mitzvah quickly approaching on the horizon. And I didn't want to overstate it in the room, but I imagined, I told him, it could be a turning point for the entire Jewish people, if not the world. Of course, I was talking about my daughter Shelby reading from the Torah in front of the Kotel in just a few short years. I think of it, and more importantly, she speaks of it as an important component of what it will mean for her to reach the status of a bat mitzvah, a daughter of the tradition of our commandments. I explained that my grandparents prevailed the Shoah and instilled Zionism into our cores. And I don't know anybody who loves Israel with the type of absolute resolve as my children. We're not talking about saving apathetic millennials and bringing them to Israel. I'm talking about Israel supporting a Jewish girl who speaks often to her own mother's dismay. She speaks about making aliyah and serving the Jewish state. Forget about the millennials and Natalie Portman and all the problems of American Jewry, I said to him. The entire Jewish narrative, from Abraham and Sarah, through the Maccabees and the Chalutzim, the pioneers, and David Ben-Gurion and Tzachi Hanegbi, has led to this Sarah, Shelby's Hebrew name, to become a bat mitzvah at the base of the Kotel, the last remnant of our Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, in the modern, autonomous, sovereign Jewish state. Sarah and Ruth and Esther and Golda Meir will feel their stories come together with this one embodiment of Jewish strength. And it seems to me that in this moment, Israel has a choice. With whom does Israel side? Does the state of Israel stand to protect the rights of a strong, brilliant Zionist woman whose God-given right is to read her people's Torah as an adult in the land to which that Torah promises to her as an inheritance? Or does the state choose to protect the yeshiva bachers, the Haredim, who stand and scream and whistle in an effort to ruin such simchas for the Jewish people? He looked at me. Each time a family approaches the Kotel with their son or daughter, the state of Israel should welcome them and welcome their choice to bind the simcha into the Zionist ideal. Israel should welcome these teenagers as future diplomats, as current spokespeople, just as it does as we give our sons and daughters to be lone soldiers. And instead, the state of Israel makes a major mistake by allowing these opportunities to turn into something ugly. We allow the worst of our 18th century versions of ourselves to ruin these moments for the leaders of our bright tomorrow. And the reason why I bring it up this morning was because I sensed that we didn't speak to one another as Israeli politician and American rabbi. We spoke to each other as Jewish men, as a vested Jewish husband and a proud Jewish father. On this men's club Shabbat, what could be better than to retell the meeting of two Jewish men sitting in a room trying to discuss and fix problems in our national Jewish home and owing much of our inspiration to our wives and children. I even saw a rendering of the new egalitarian Kotel prayer space. It's still separate, needs to be flushed out, but I have to tell you it looked beautiful. The construction firm has already been contracted. What was sad was that Minister Hanegbi asked us to reach out to our counterparts in Israel. You see, because the leaders of the conservative Masorti and reform movements have lost the willingness and the faith to sit down once again. There was a massive breach of trust by the Prime Minister and his inner circle. In Hanegbi's own words, and I quote, "You are all right to feel betrayed." I'm not naive. The ultra-Orthodox will try to stall this compromise at the 11th hour again, I assure you. These meetings have been going on for years without resolution. But the meeting, the dialogue, the 2 hours of sitting together and sharing thoughts was exactly what I had hoped was possible, what could still be possible. So why am I so optimistic? Because we only have each other. Israeli Jews can travel around the world looking for friends, but we are family. American Jews can live as comfortably as we want, but the land of Israel is our national home, and the Israeli Jews that live there, they are our family. There is no other choice but this relationship and this dialogue. At the end of the meeting, I thanked Hanegbi for his courage. Here is a man who has spent his entire life, since being a paratrooper in the IDF, he has spent his life serving the state of Israel. And he willingly came to America and subjected himself 3 times to a room of rabbis who criticize his work and the decisions of his Likud party. A rabbi in the room asked for American liberal Jews to be considered when Likud votes on matters in the Knesset. And I suddenly became very aware of the way that the Israelis looked at us in the room. We don't live there. I don't think any of us in the room had served in the IDF. And imagine for one moment if citizens from another country asked us to vote on their behalf in our upcoming elections. It simply wouldn't make very much sense to us. And yet, here we sit in this room and we feel totally comfortable asking a minister of the Israeli government to consider our children as his constituents when he casts his next vote, because for better or for worse, he is a leader of the Jewish people. This entire compromise agreement isn't rational. It's based on religion and faith and appeasing people, American Jews, who don't vote in Israeli national elections. And I would argue that it doesn't have to be rational because the entire scenario is based on family. On my way out of the meeting, we took a picture together, and I shook Minister Hanegbi's hand, and I thanked him for coming and listening to us. And I told him to please tell the Prime Minister they have 3 years to finish the new egalitarian space at the Kotel Plaza. And his aide wrote down the name Shelby Lebovitz to take back to the Prime Minister's office. Without letting go of my hand, he said to me, "I want you to invite me to the bat mitzvah." I said, "Let me warn you, I will." He nodded and said, "I'll be there." And it felt like family. And that means that it came with love. And that means I'm not sure that he'll actually come. Shabbat Shalom.